Welcome to Be My Guest here on Highland Hospital Radio. In this series, we invite people from the NHS Highland area who are involved in charities and organisations focused on health and well-being. In today's episode, we're looking at the effects of alcoholism. In the studio with me today are 4 people whose lives have been adversely affected by alcoholism. And they hope that in telling you their shares and their experiences, that if that resonates with you, if that matches your experiences in life, that there is hope, that there is someone you can reach out to, and you can find the support that you need. All 4 of our guests have been supported by the work of Alcoholics Anonymous. By its very nature, anonymity is one of their key principles. The names that you will hear today are not these people's real names, but they are real people and their experiences are real. You might find that some of their stories are quite challenging to listen to and very difficult, so we do advise some discretion. First of all, I'd like to welcome Duncan to the studio and ask him to share his experience.
Thank you, Tom. My name's Duncan and I'm an alcoholic. I'm a very grateful member of Alcoholics Anonymous today, beyond grateful to Alcoholics Anonymous today for the life of which I've been given. I'd just like to start off by doing exactly what's asked of us when we come to these kind of things, and that's to share what we were like, what happened, and what we're like today. So I'm going to tell you my truth, my experience, my strength, my hope, and if I can just reach out to one listener today, then I will have fulfilled my commitment and helped somebody. So I guess I'll start back at the beginning, and I believe it's a contentious subject, but I believe that I was born with this illness, and I believe it is an illness. It's a disease of the mind, body, and the spirit. And when I talk about a spirit, what I really mean is, I have this hole in the soul, a spiritual malady. As long as I can remember, I was never able to fit into any sort of social environment. Always on the outside looking in. I could be at my own birthday party and still feel like I was the odd one out. And that all changed. Those feelings changed when I discovered alcohol at the young age of 13 years old. It did things for me that I could never do for myself. It gave me that confidence. And little did I know, but, alcohol became my master from that very young age. I could talk to the girls. I thought I was Brad Pitt. I could talk to the guys. I thought I was Mike Tyson. It made me invincible. It took me out of myself. I used alcohol because it changed the way that I felt. It had a hold of me. It did so much for me that I really didn't care what it was doing to me. And back in school, I would drink beforehand, drink after, and even drink during. I left school and I went to university, coming from the Highlands of Scotland down to the bright lights of Glasgow. It really took hold. And needless to say, I dropped out of university. Found myself, stuck in some of the dingiest, darkest pubs in Glasgow from the moment that I woke up in the morning to the moment that I went to bed at night. So I came home from university and went from job to job, relationship after relationship, never being able to put down the bottle. Alcohol had a real grip on me, and the consequences were getting, worse and worse. I was drinking from the moment that I woke up in the morning till the moment that I went to bed at night. I tried everything. I visited doctors, spoke to psychiatrists, psychologists. I tried treatment centres. I went to New Craigs, which is a hospital up here. But I was still in denial. I was certain, so sure that I would be able to sort my problems myself. I had no idea what I was up against. But today I know, thanks to Alcoholics Anonymous, that I suffer from this disease and that I'm absolutely powerless over alcohol. I can admit that today. I can concede to my innermost self that I am an alcoholic. I suffer from a disease which centres in my mind, and it tells me that I'm not an alcoholic. It tells me that things are going to be different this time. I managed to go out for a couple of beers with the boys and watch the football, and I'll be home by 6 o'clock. That's never happened. It tells me that the only reason I drink is because I was born the way I was, because you treated me the way you did. It was always making excuses. I was fluent in that language of victimese. Always blaming other people. If you had the same life, if you had the life that I had, then you would drink too. It used to tell me little, it was sneaky. It really was, this disease in my mind, that told me that the only reason that I would wake up in these places like hospitals and jail cells and all sorts of horrible situations, was because, maybe I hadn't had my dinner the night before, but I've had my Weetabix this morning, I'll be okay. It was sneaky, it was cunning, baffling, powerful. This disease is also patient, progressive, and fatal. It's a progressive illness that I suffer from, and it never got any better, it only ever got worse. I had a daughter when I was 30 years old, and rightly so, her mum left me, because, she could see in me that I was hopeless. Nothing was working. I tried everything. I really did, and by the end, alcohol had stripped everything from me. I came into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, battered, broken. A wheeler, a dealer, a stealer, a cheater, and just out of ideas. This was the last place that I tried, and it's the only place that is working for me. The solution that's on offer in Alcoholics Anonymous absolutely works. I came into the rooms and I was ready. I'd had that moment, that internal snap. One afternoon, enough was enough. I can't do this anymore. I am sick and tired of being sick and tired, constantly going round in that misery go-round, of getting drunk, waking up, promising myself I'm never going to do it again, only to find myself doing it again a very short while after. It was explained to me in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous that what makes me an alcoholic is that when I start, I cannot stop. And I can absolutely relate to that today. I've got this disease, like I said, of my mind, my body, and my spirit. When I put a drink inside me, I get thirstier. I don't have an off switch. Once I start, I cannot stop. I lose control and I end up in these horrible situations. I've had that from the get-go. I understand that today. My body is abnormal to other people's. And it gives me, and Alcoholics Anonymous, I only realised that through coming to Alcoholics Anonymous and listening to people in the rooms talking about this illness, understanding and identifying with some of the things that these people had done that I'd done too. It was suggested to me very early on in my recovery that I find somebody armed with the facts about themselves who'd been through a 12-step program, and that's what I did. I took the cotton wool out of my ears and I put it in my mouth for the first time because I was desperate. I didn't know what else to do. And I listened, and they explained this illness to me, and they took me on a remarkable journey, an unbelievable journey, which, like I said at the start, has not only saved my life, but it's given me a life. I know things about myself today, which for years, 20 years in fact, I've tried to blot out. since coming in, remarkable things have happened to me. The gifts that I am beginning to receive in my life are far greater than I could have ever imagined. I thought I was destined to die, Tom. I'd given up on myself. And today it's not like that. Today I've been given a second chance. I've been given a new life. And as long as I continue to work these 12 steps of recovery and stay close to my higher power, then I know I'll be all right. Now, I tried running the show myself, and it didn't turn out very well. What I have to do today is put my reliance in something far bigger and better than me to keep me sober, because I couldn't do it. And that's been, that has been key to my recovery. So thanks very much for inviting us to come along. Thank you for allowing me to share my experience with you. That daughter that I lost through my alcohol, that daughter that I had lost through my drinking is now back in my life today. I have a job today. I've got a roof over my head. I know what love is today. I never knew what love was. I only ever had prisoners and hostages. Today, I'm so grateful to Alcoholics Anonymous. So thank you for allowing us to come and share.
You're listening to Highland Hospital Radio and this edition of Be My Guest, where we're discussing the effects of alcoholism and the support available from Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, William is going to introduce himself and tell you about his experience.
Hello friends, my name's William. I'm an alcoholic, member of Alcoholics Anonymous, and really appreciate the opportunity of being able to speak with you today. We're asked in Alcoholics Anonymous to share our experience, strength and hope about what we were like, what happened and what we're like now. So I'll just try and do that. I started drinking when I was about 15. I was a young guy and I never felt quite good about myself. I was always a bit shy and always thought the other guys had better clothes and looked better and tell jokes better, and I was scared of the girls and I just felt out of it. I heard someone say once that they were standing in the street corner with a hole in their belly and the wind blowing through, this hole in the soul thing, and that's how I felt. I didn't have any real justification to feel that way, but that's the way I was. And went home with a school friend to a wee place up in the west coast one weekend, and we went to the local hostelry and had a couple of half pints or whatever, and then went to the local dance with a half bottle of warm whiskey out the back and got stuck into that, and almost immediately I found out what alcohol could do for me. That shy wee boy that wasn't good enough, all of a sudden I was 10 foot tall. I could laugh, I could joke, I could get up and dance, I could talk with the lassies, I could act a bit hard. It filled in all the holes in my personality, and I really thought I had arrived. I blacked out, total memory loss that first night, and that was something that was to follow me through all my drinking over many, many years. When I came to the next day, I was told I'd vomited all over my clothes and made a fool of myself, but I wasn't too worried about that. All I could think was, when's the next time I can get a chance to drink to feel that way? And that's the way my life was for a long, long time. By the time I was 16, I was out of school and away at the Merchant Navy and had a very good career planned out in front of me. Part of the alcoholic personality for me was a total inability to get told what to do by anyone, a very rebellious streak, and I'd thrown away that career opportunity within a year. I'd never been past Inverness in my life. I come from over the west, and I'd never been past Inverness in my life, and all of a sudden I woke up in Hong Kong and Singapore and all around the Far East Coast. Never saw any of it. The first bar, the first drink, and then off I'd go into the blackout and wake up again, sore head, wondering what happened, and it'll be okay. This is a progressive illness, and when I was young there wasn't too much trouble, but I was full-blown alcoholic before I was legally old enough to drink, and it stripped me of any opportunity to build any kind of life. So I threw away the merchant navy and I ended up working in the fishing boats, and I did that for a long, long time, 25 years, and it suited my life, suited my lifestyle. Could stay in the boat, go away to sea, get well fed and looked after and hard work and get paid well, and then come ashore and spend all the money in 3 or 4 days and then go back to the boat. As time went on, I started missing the boat, and by the end of my drinking I couldn't get a job anymore, although I was very good at my job. At 23-year-old I was being offered a boat to skipper, and I was going to have my own boat and build a great life, and I'd met a girl and we got married and I'd bought a flat, and that's way back in the late 70s. There wasn't many people from my background that bought their own places then, and within 3 years she was gone, the flat was gone, and I was living in the woods, and I never really got up again. I tried very hard to build a life, and what would happen was I'd get to work and I'd keep my head down, I'd try really hard and I'd build up everything, and then I'd pick up that first drink and boom, So like Duncan said earlier, once I start drinking there's something wrong with me. I've got an allergy to alcohol, and once I taste it something happens in my body and I cannot stop. It's always been that way with me. Some people drink themselves into it. For me it's always been that way since I was a boy. Alcoholism is widespread in my family down both sides throughout generations, and I believe I was genetically predisposed to this disease. So I went on and on and on, and I could never see the truth about it. I was just a young guy in the Highlands doing my thing. Plenty of my mates were living the same way. But the truth was that they started getting older and they got married and they built lives, and I just carried on doing the same thing. And I got to my early to mid-30s, and by that time it was quite regular for me to be living in woods and sleeping in sheds and sleeping in old cars and all that, because I just threw everything away over and over again. Drove away all the people that tried to help me, because plenty of people did try to help me. But this disease made it impossible for me to be helped. And I was going out with this girl, and one time she said to me, "Right, that's it, smear the drink. If you don't stop the drink, we're finished." And I thought, well, I'll have the girl, so I'm getting older now, that's time to stop. I'll grow up and I'll just do my thing, and that's me finished with it, and stay with her and we'll get on and live a good life. And I rolled out this willpower to beat it, And I lasted 3 months not drinking, and all that time I was miserable and agitated and angry and fearful, restless, irritable and discontented. And then one day we had an argument, and as soon as we had the argument I just stormed out of the house and picked up a can of lager, and that was it. Boom. Straight back into the act of alcoholism. So I just gave up. And I said, well, that's the way my life's been since I was a boy, and that's the way it's going to be. When I get money, when I get a chance to get money, whenever I get the chance to drink, I'll drink. And once I drink, whatever's going to happen will happen, and I'll wake up if I wake up, and one of these days I'll die, and it can't come soon enough. And that's a very sad place to be for a relatively young man, early to mid-30s. That's what I was. What I didn't know was that I was going to get to a place where it was that sore and that painful that I would just give up, and that's what I needed to do. I got put into Beechwood House in the Highlands. It wasn't that long after it opened. It was in 94, springtime in 94, and my local nurse put me in there, and I'd never asked for help with my drinking all my days. And from Beechwood, the people in there really tried to help me, and without that I wouldn't have got sober, because at that point I could not stop. And I had money, so I didn't have to stop. And it was drinking night and day, night and day, night and day, 24 hours a day. If I was awake, I was drinking. And wet beds and sore faces and jail cells and all that stuff. It's not the way I was brought up, but that's where I ended up. In Beechwood, I was away from the drink, and after a few days, 3 or 4 days away from the drink, I stopped rattling and stopped shaking. And 3 guys were in the same time as me. I was just in for a fortnight for a detox. And 3 of the guys that were in with me were going to an AA meeting, and they asked me if I wanted to go. And I said, well, I'll give it a try, And I knew I wouldn't be able to stop, because I tried so hard and I'd give it everything I had, and I still ended up drinking. But I thought, I'll give it a try, maybe I'll get a wee break. And I went to that AA meeting hoping that I might get a few weeks off it, get some money, sort out the debt up at home at my mother's and all that stuff. And I went to that meeting on a Tuesday night in the old nurses' quarters in Rigmore. Sat there with my head down, bitterly ashamed. Someone else's clothes on, an old pair of trainers with the soles flapping off, you know. And I'm the guy that had made the big bucks and I had nothing, you know. And I give myself just enough of a doing that I was able to listen. And I sat there and listened as people shared going round the room as I'm trying to share today. And one fellow was talking about wet beds, and someone else was talking about the lie and the sheet and the con, and someone else was talking about lost jobs, and someone was talking about the violence. I thought, who are these people? You don't hear these conversations in the pub, you know. You don't go down to the pub on a Sunday morning after being a blackout all weekend, and someone says to you, how are you doing, Willie? Oh, my self-esteem's a bit low, I'm feeling terrible, I pissed myself last night. You don't really tell folk that, and these people are sitting there telling the truth, and it was the honesty that grabbed me straight away. And I couldn't wait to get to the next meeting, and from that time, I've never stopped going, you know. And a wee woman, she's dead a long time now, and she died many years sober, took me aside after the meeting, a wee white-haired lady, and she said, if you stay away from that first drink, son, and keep coming to your meetings, your life will get better. And I didn't know if I believed it or not, but I thought, I'll give it a try. And I often say what happened to me was, you know, I went to Alcoholics Anonymous hopeless, because I tried so hard and I gave it everything, and none of it worked, you know, and I couldn't stop and I couldn't leave it alone. But that day, that night in Rigmore, just listening to the people sharing, I left there and something had happened, and what happened was I had some hope. And there used to be an old guy in the Highlands, he died a few years ago, he was 50 odd years sober, and he used to say that he got hope in AA, and he went home and he opened the dictionary and looked up the word hope, and he found one definition that suited him, and it said an awakening of the spirit within. And I thought, that's what happened to me. There's something in there, maybe, just maybe, I don't have to die of this, maybe I don't have to live in the woods, maybe I don't have to live the life I've been living in for 25 years. Perhaps, just perhaps, I can stay off it. I never knew that by staying in Alcoholics Anonymous and by doing what's suggested and by getting one of these sponsors to lead me through the 12-step programme, then not only would I be able to stay sober one day at a time for many, many years, but that I would have a life beyond my wildest dreams, that I would be okay. I could walk about and just be like other people are and not have to worry about drink. I thought I'd be sitting there white-knuckling it forever and ever. I'm not drinking today, I'm not drinking today, I'm not drinking today, I'm not drinking today. But through this process, I found a way where not only what Alcoholics Anonymous promises is the problem will be removed, it does not exist for us. Drink isn't about what it's about today. I haven't thought about drinking, fancied a drink, considered taking a drink, wanted to take a drink for I don't know how long, well over 25 years, one day at a time. And for a guy like me that used to live in the woods, that is quite an amazing thing. Alcoholics Anonymous is a very, very powerful fellowship. It offers a spiritual program of recovery, which can turn a hopeless, helpless drunk into me, like a hopeless, helpless drunk like me into something resembling a decent citizen, you know. So the only reason I'm here today is because Alcoholics Anonymous asked me to come along and share my experience, strength and hope, and that helps me. And had they not been sitting there waiting for me the day I went in, I'd be long dead and gone. I lost a lot of friends to this disease. It's a killer disease. Not everyone gets it. This is about one day. I've been sober for nearly 30 years, but this is about today, one day at a time. You know, Alcoholics Anonymous showed me how to live. It taught me how to live through the 12 steps. So thank you all for listening to me. And it's great to be here, and I love Alcoholics Anonymous.
This is Be My Guest on Highland Hospital Radio, where on today's episode we are discussing the effects of alcoholism. Our next speaker is going to tell about their story. Again, I'd like to remind you that some of these stories may be very difficult to listen to, and we do advise some discretion. I'd like to ask Faye to share her story.
I'm Faye and I'm an alcoholic. I was of the hopeless state of mind and body and soul regarding alcoholism. As a child, I grew up in a loving family home. I couldn't have asked for anything else. You know, fantastic parents. My fears were outside of my home when I went to school or birthday parties or out to play with friends, sleepovers, anything out with the home. You know, I had my own group of friends, but I never felt I belonged. No matter where I went, who with. You know, all my friends thought I was cool and funny to hang around with, but it was all a mask, and I had perfected lots of different masks for different people in different situations. But underneath, I felt like I was nothing, and I just wanted the world to swallow me up. I was around about 13 years of age, was when I started to drink. You know, I came from a very small place on the West Coast where drinking seemed like the culture. You know, jobs at that age were working in hotels, cleaning rooms, and working in hotels means that there's a bar. So when I would finish work, I would go and wait in the bar from my lift home, you know, watching everyone drink. I didn't drink myself, just juice, but it was there, you know. My drink would be normally at weekends, you know, and at that point I'm in a relationship with a guy who's very abusive. You know, he tortured me physically and mentally. I very quickly felt more alone in the world than I had ever done before in my whole life. You know, he battered me, he raped me, he controlled me. You know, he completely tortured me. When I left home with him, left my hometown with him, after a couple of years I managed to get out of that relationship, you know. And I was free, you know. I was allowed to go out with my friends, you know, every weekend and nights when I wasn't working the next day. You know, I would be out in the pubs and I'd be drinking. It eventually got to the point where my work and my college were becoming affected. So I quit my college and I quit my jobs before I got pushed out the door. You know, I tried moving back home to my family, but my drinking followed me there. And of course all the jobs there available were back to the hotels and pubs. So I decided again to leave home and move back to Inverness for the last time. I got a job which didn't involve pubs, no drink. I met someone, I had children. You know, that relationship became very violent, and me and my kids ended up in a women's refuge. And again, felt very, very alone. I sat there and I felt sorry for myself. I didn't know how to cope on my own with two babies. I had no family around, you know, and I had, you know, a head that was a right mess. I just didn't know what to do. So drink started again, you know. I brought that into the refuge against the rules of, like, the tenancy. You know, it started with 2 bottles of wine hidden in the bottom of my children's pram. Then I moved up to a box of wine so nobody could hear the clanking of the bottles. You know, and it was only a couple of months in the refuge. My father passed away and my whole world just crumbled. You know, he's my best friend, my idol. He had just gone. And I thought my life couldn't get any worse. From then on in, my drinking escalated rapidly, and I was drinking during the day and at night, and I thought that was the only way I could deal with it. And this continued and continued. You know, it got to the age where my kids were in school as well. We had found a home of our own, my drinking just became out of control. You know, I took the kids up to school after I'd been drinking. The teacher had noticed that I was drinking and reported it to social work. And that was the start of that. The only way I was able to keep my children was if another family member came to live with me. So that was put in place pretty quickly. You know, it worked for a while, but my drinking was still out of control and it was only getting worse. You know, instead of the wine, it's turned into litres of gin. Hiding it behind the couch and drinking as much as I could when someone would leave the room, because I didn't know when I was going to get the chance to have another drink. So I would drink as much as I could out of that bottle. You know, I lied to family, especially my mum. I was lying to her about needing money for gas and electricity and things. I was completely manipulated people to get money, to get my own way, so I could get drink. If I was going out anywhere, I would be pouring gin into water bottles, because I couldn't go a minute without it. The fear would go through me if I thought I was going to be without a drink anywhere I went. I became very irritable as well, you know, 'cause if I couldn't get a drink when I needed it right that minute, I would become very, very irritable. My kids also became just a problem for my drinking. You know, I love my kids and I loved my kids. But they just got in the way of it. You know, drinking had me. It really had me. You know, nothing mattered. Nothing mattered more to me than drinking. Because I didn't know how to live without it. You know. Eventually the social work came and they took my kids away from me. And that wasn't even enough to stop me. You know. I was heartbroken. And I don't know, did it give me more of an excuse to drink more because nothing was in my way anymore? I just didn't know any other way to live without it. You know, I just hid myself away. I closed my curtains, isolated myself, turned my phone off, locked the door, and I sat there with my bottle. And I would only leave the house about 10 minutes before the shop was shut to go and get my drink for the next day. And that night, I was always crying, you know, because I wanted out. I wanted out of this hell. I wanted to stop drinking. I didn't know how to. I eventually got the courage and I spoke to my doctor and spoke to CPNs and counsellors to find some way out of the hell that I was in. You know, and none of it worked, only because I lied to them about how much I was drinking. You know, I was so ashamed. And I would just go back home after my appointments and drink. You know, I was completely in denial. I also tried rehab for a couple of weeks, and I knew it wasn't long enough for me to get well, and I went back to rehab for a further 14 weeks. When I came out of rehab, I felt great, absolutely fantastic. I felt like a new woman. You know, they did work wonders in there, but it didn't last for me. You know, I still had the illness. And it wasn't before long that I had picked up a drink again. Because I didn't know how to live in the world. You know, I still didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. You know, I couldn't live life on life's terms anymore. Or never could. the only thing that ever made me feel confident and alive was alcohol. So from the minute I picked up that first drink, everything went back to square one before I went to rehab. I was back there in that misery and depression. And it was about a year or so after that, my partner came to me and said he had found a solution, and I listened, and it was Alcoholics Anonymous. I had been to AA whilst I was in rehab, and I went to the meetings and listened. But I didn't listen properly, So my return to Alcoholics Anonymous this time was life-transforming. I went into the rooms and I was welcomed as if I was part of a family. They took me under their wings, and I sat and listened to all of them, and I could relate to like at least something every person said. At one point I actually thought they were talking about me because I could just identify so much, But there was something else that I heard this time that I didn't hear a lot the last time, was that they were talking about a sponsor, they were talking about a big book, they were talking about a 12-step program of recovery, and that's what I missed last time. So this time I listened, I got myself a sponsor and I got myself a big book, and I worked those steps. My life depended on it, so I worked them like my life depended on it. My life today is amazing. I have inner peace. I have my children back in my life. I'm free from the thought of alcohol, which is amazing too, I have hope today. I have faith today. And that I have a life, and I am alive, which is a miracle. And it's all thanks to Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for the life I have today.
You're listening to Be My Guest here on Highland Hospital Radio, where our focus on today's episode is about alcoholism and the support that is available to you from Alcoholics Anonymous. Charlie joins us now in the studio, and I asked her to tell me more about the history of Alcoholics Anonymous as well as her own experiences.
Thank you, Tom. My name's Charlie and I am an alcoholic. There was a New York stockbroker through circumstances found himself. He was unemployable and unemployed through his alcoholism. And he had come across in a hospital in New York what he thought might be a cure for his alcoholism. He was very, very new in recovery, hanging on to what little sobriety he had. And he went headed off to the Midwest to get this big job that would have changed his life forever. And it fell through. And he found himself in a hotel room in Akron, Ohio, with no money and none of the friends who had been his support group in New York. So through a series of phone calls, he made a connection with a gentleman there who was known to the local community as having an alcohol problem. He was a surgeon in the hospital, and Bill met up with him, and his name was Bob Smith, Dr. Bob Smith. And the two of them sat and they chatted for about 6 or 7 hours. It started with Dr. Bob saying to his wife, "Give me 15 minutes with this guy and come and knock on the door." Many hours later, Dr. Bob was absolutely delighted and fascinated to hear what Bill Wilson had been telling him about alcoholism. And for the first time, we have the occasion where one alcoholic talking to another alcoholic brings about identification that no other professional or any other person can bring about. From there, they started a local group in Akron, and Dr. Bob worked in his hospital, and one at a time, members would come to them and get recovery from alcoholism. And they began to write a book because they realised that travelling salesmen could take the story. In those days, travelling salesmen were everywhere in America. We're talking about the 10th of June, 1935. No television. And the travelling salesman would go from state to state, town to town, and try and find another suffering alcoholic to talk to. So it was always word of mouth that we carried the message. And then it became, let's write a book about this. Because Bill would lie in his bed at night. Bill Wilson was a very spiritual man. And he would lie in his bed at night worrying about the alcoholic in California who was still suffering and who hadn't heard that there could be a solution to their alcoholism. So they decided they would have hospitals and treatment centres, and the imagination ran wild. But then they decided that probably the best thing to do was to write a book. And they approached John Rockefeller Jr. through circumstances to ask for funds for this book. And when John Rockefeller Jr. and his senior businessmen met for a dinner with a few alcoholics in New York, they decided that money would spoil this thing. So you can imagine the blow that was to the very, very embryonic fellowship. They thought they were going to get millions of pounds, this was going to save the world, but instead of that they left with nothing. But they did get an allowance to write the big book. And many people helped AA in the beginning. There's an article by Jack Alexander, was a reporter, and his editor sent him along. Go along and see what these bum drunks are doing. Do an article about it and squash the interest in it. And instead of that, Jack Alexander travelled all over the States where tiny little groups of men were getting together. And at this time it was men getting together and staying sober. And he published an article in the Evening Post in New York. And they had so many inquiries, 8,000 inquiries, they didn't know how to handle this. So that was when they wrote the book. And the book is called, it had many names, but they settled on Alcoholics Anonymous. And that big book is now reproduced in 79 languages. And they say it's the most popular book in the world. And it's in that book, it tells us very, very simply what we have to do to recover from the illness of alcoholism. In 1955, the World Health Organization recognised alcoholism as an illness. And through the help of many physicians in America, many doctors, many hospitals, they began to open treatment centres for people to go in and recover. Because in the beginning, if you're an alcoholic and you drink the way an alcoholic does, the dangers to your health are many. And the worst of all is if you stop drinking immediately, you can have an alcoholic seizure. I had a son who had an alcoholic seizure recently, and it led to him having a stroke. So nothing's changed in the 90 years. The illness is the same. It's how we treat it that's different. And we treat it by working. There's 164 pages at the beginning of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it tells us exactly what we suffer from. We suffer from an allergy to alcoholism. My body does not metabolise alcohol the way perhaps 85-90% of the population does. And when I take one drink, I can't stop. And when somebody begs and pleads and I try to stop, very, very shortly, my mind will tell me it'll be different. I once had a doctor rang me and told me that there were corpses in Raigmore mortuary who had a better liver function reading than I had. And I said to her, I'll stop drinking gin and I'll start drinking lager. That is the impossibility of the alcoholic to understand what they're suffering from. But they come to Alcoholics Anonymous, and there are many meetings in Inverness and around Inverness and all over the Highlands and Islands. And you come to a meeting and you get introduced to the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And when I met a gentleman and I asked him, he seemed to speak my language, and I knew that he could help me. And I asked him to take me through the big book. And he said to me, "You'll need a pen." And I said, "I don't write in books." You see, I had been in the faculty of education, and I didn't write in books. And he said, "You'll write in this book." And I did write in that book, and I still have that book. The whole process of recovery is very, very simple. I suffer from an illness that can be treated not with medication, but with change in me. The book introduces me to a 12-step program. It's a spiritual program, because when I came here, I thought that the world hated me and I hated the world. And then I found that I suffered from the physical allergy, the mental obsession, and the spiritual malady, a hole in my soul, and that everybody in the world hated me, when in fact I hated me. And the book, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, has taught me how to live one day at a time without an alcoholic drink. And all I have to do is keep coming back and passing on the message of recovery.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Be My Guest on Highland Hospital Radio. If you've been affected by today's content, or you want to reach out for support, I'm going to let Duncan and Faye tell you how to do it.
If, when you honestly want to, you find you can't stop completely, or when drinking you have little control over the amount you take, then we can help. Come and join us at our local meetings throughout the Highlands. You can find our local meetings at www.alcoholics-anonymous.org.uk, or you can call us for free on 0800 917 7650. All inquiries are treated in the strictest of confidence. If you can identify with any of us today, then you're very welcome to attend our meetings. We can help. There is a solution. There is a way out.
You are no longer alone.